What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for Batwoman Season 1, Episode 5, titled Mine is a Long and Sad Tale, and then Supergirl Season 5, Episode 5, titled Dangerous Liaisons. The reason I'm putting this in the same video, the reason I'm putting these two reviews in the same video, which is not what I've done up until this point, is because I don't really have many thoughts about either of these episodes. For some reason, both episodes this week just didn't really have much for me to talk about, so I doubt either of them would fill up an entire video. And even with them together, I don't think this video will be very long at all. So with that in mind, let's just begin with a review of Batwoman Season 1, Episode 5. This was, I think, the first episode of Batwoman to not have anything related to Batman, and because of that, it's worse. I mean, that's probably the most interesting thing about this show, and that's the mystery of Batman, where he is and where he went, and just seeing him, but also mentions of the Batman mythos and Rogues Gallery and family. This episode had none of that. It had one mention of Bruce, and that's with the narration from Kate, where she's writing to Bruce, and that's it. Literally nothing else from this episode had anything to do with Batman. There was no confirmation of any of the characters or any of the villains, and there was no appearances either. Because of that, there was less interest in this episode on my part, and because of that, there's a lot less to talk about as well. Anyway, this episode has a couple of storylines, one of them involving Kate and Alice, as Kate just kidnaps Alice, and they go on a road trip, basically, and Alice tells her origin story. I said this before, but Alice is definitely one of the more interesting things about this show, and definitely one of the better things about the show. I thought the actress is really good, and she's a very unique villain, so seeing her origin story is definitely pretty interesting. It's definitely the most interesting thing about this episode, and while it wasn't exactly amazing or anything, and I'm not going to give this a high score because of the origin story that we see, it is also not bad at all, and that's all fine. And that's really the same thing goes for the entirety of the storyline, where it's, not the interesting part, just the it's fine part with Kate and Alice and even Jacob and Sophie. It's all fine, and I really don't even know what to say. It's all fine, and the new character, the new villain, Mouse, his connection to Alice, it's mildly, if even that, interesting. So overall, there's really not much else to talk about this storyline. I don't know why, I'm just having a hard time talking about what there is, like what happened in this episode, talking about my thoughts about it, because it just happened, it was fine, it was there, and moving on. And then there's the Mary/Luke storyline. The storyline begins with Catherine telling Mary about what she did with Beth all those years ago, and her reaction, Mary's reaction, is definitely understandable. I said this in my review for episode 4, but I don't think Catherine should ever be redeemed. Well, what she did was evil, and she definitely is an evil person. Anyway, Mary goes to talk to Kate at Wayne Tower. She's not there, and instead meets Luke Fox. I have some interactions in this episode, which are fine and good, and again, don't really have much else to mention in this storyline. So that's basically the end of this review. It's all fun, it all meshes together, it's already very forgettable from what I saw it just a couple hours ago, and I barely remember some of it. It was just there. So while I don't think this episode is as bad as the last one, as it isn't filler, I still think this episode is pretty bad, and I'll give it a 5.8 out of 10. So then there's Supergirl Season 5, Episode 5, titled Dangerous Liaisons, which is an episode that shares its title with an episode of Arrow Season 5. Nowhere near the best episode of that season, but I guess that is an interesting title parallel, because Episode 7, titled Tremors, also shares its title with an episode from Arrow, which that one is Season 2. Anyway, in this episode, Kara talks to William Day, and it's very clear that they are coming closer, and they're setting up their romance, which I've said this so many times already. I don't really care about any of the romances on the show except for Supergirl and Manel, also technically Clark and Lois, but I do think that they actually have some good chemistry, and maybe it could go somewhere if they do end up getting together in this season. Anyway, during this talk, Kara mentions the DEO, and she takes William there, and he learns about it. Then they interrogate the airwoman that attacked Kara in the last episode, which is all fine. Again, like I said with the Batwoman episode, for some reason, maybe it's because of the lack of crisis set up in these episodes, I just don't know what to talk about here. It's just, it all happens. Like, legitimately the only reason I'm watching Batwoman and Supergirl at this point is for the crisis setup. So when there isn't any of it, or for Batwoman also the Batman stuff, but when there isn't any of either of those things, there just isn't much to talk about. So for Supergirl, this episode doesn't have any crisis setup whatsoever, while every single episode before it did, so I do have a lot less to talk about because I really don't care as much about the actual storyline of the season, if at all. Anyway, after what I'm talking about here, William and Kara and Alex also end up interrogating the spider creature, which takes over Brainy. The way they shot it, I think they tried to make it really creepy or weird, but it was really frustrating because it kept on doing the same exact shot, and it never just went to another one. I don't know, it was very repetitive and a little frustrating how it never changed shot when looking at Brainy. I think the actor was good in the role, and in this actual different role where he's taken over by this spider creature, but I for some reason found this scene not unsettling, but maybe unsettling, but not in a good way. So anyway, later in the episode, Kara sneaks into Andrea's office to get information on her or to investigate, and William has the exact same idea on the exact same night at the exact same time. Anyway, William then tells Kara about his best friend, and we see some flashbacks to when that best friend dated Andrea, and then after talking to Andrea about her family, who were shady people, he goes missing. But then when William goes to his house, the Dr. Octopus guy we see, Rip Roar as he's called, he shows up at where his friend was gone. It was pretty obvious based off the scene that Rip Roar was his friend. After seeing his friend, I mean, I could already tell that it was Rip Roar. I mean, the facial features in the mouth area, they're exactly the same, and it's crazy that William wasn't able to tell this, but if they were going for a twist later with Rip Roar being his friend, it didn't work because it was very obvious. Anyway, then Rip Roar tries to melt the ice caps with using some Lex Luthor guns, so Lex Luthor was very easily able to destroy the world, or at least kill all the people on it. Anyway, Jean and Supergirl go to stop him, and I say Jean and Supergirl, not Jean and Kara, or Supergirl and Martian Manhunter, because it wasn't Martian Manhunter. I say this in like every episode, but it's so annoying how he's never in his Martian form, and there are times walking around, even though based off season 4, he definitely should be in his Martian form at all times, because of the alien pride that went on in season 4, but that's fine. But when he's actually flying around as a hero, it's just so annoying when he's in his human form, because it makes no sense that he would be more comfortable in his hero form, in his Martian form, and when he's flying around helping out, saving the world, I mean, he should definitely be in his Martian form. Anyway, aside from Jean not being in his Martian form, this whole scene was actually visually pretty good, with Dreamer stopping the tidal wave with Kara and Jean, or Supergirl and Jean, flying around the geyser, and even if John was in his human form, I think visually this whole scene was actually not bad. Then we learn that Andrea had nothing to do with what Leviathan did, where they tried to destroy the world or kill everybody on it, or almost everybody, but she is working with Leviathan. Now, Andrea is a hero in the comics named Akrata. Apparently, she's going to become Akrata in the next episode, and I'm assuming maybe they're going to give her some redemption arc from being not a criminal or anything, but I mean, she's working with Leviathan, but before, she just seemed like just a bad person, an annoying person, but now, it seems like that maybe they're going to give her a redemption arc because she's a hero in the comics, but then again, so is Agent Liberty, and I don't know if they're going to make heroes into villains 2 seasons in a row, but I mean, I'm just saying that her being a hero isn't 100% certain, as she might end up being a villain named Akrata. Anyway, this whole storyline was fine, not exactly great, visually it has some good moments, except for the fact that Jean wasn't in his Martian Manhunter form when he should have been, which is technically always, but in these sequences, in these events, in these scenes, it's inexcusable. The whole storyline as a whole was just okay, with a lot of great or maybe good moments. In terms of the Lena Luthor storyline, it was a little, if not very disappointing. I thought that there would be maybe a team up between Luthor and Malefic. I thought maybe we could see some more Malefic action, but it was really just Lena using Malefic to create some mind control device for her. I mean, Malefic I don't think was as good as he could have been, but I mean, based off episode 4, he was definitely getting better, and with the mental block that was that they could have gotten rid of in this episode, and then he could have actually gone head to head with Martian and tried to kill him, that could have been cool, but instead he was just used to create some sort of device for Lena, and Lena just used him where he didn't get anything out of it, which I really didn't like. It was very disappointing, and overall, if that was the end of Malefic, this was such a disappointing character arc. Episode 4 was good, but literally every other episode with Malefic in it was not good, and it didn't use the character well, and that includes this episode. So anyway, that concludes my review for Supergirl Season 5, Episode 5. Definitely had a lot more to talk about in this review than for the Batwoman one. And while I thought this episode was certainly not terrible, certainly a lot better than Batwoman this week, which is technically true for every episode of Supergirl so far, or at least most of them, I do think that it was not nearly as good as Episode 4, and it was basically equal in quality, if not just maybe a tiny bit better than the first couple episodes of the season, episodes 1 through 3. Anyway, I'll give this episode a 7 out of 10. So anyway, let me know your thoughts about these episodes in the comments down below. And if you like this video, make sure to leave a like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for watching.